Greetings, welcome back to the channel Humanity, Facts and Mysteries. Deserts are usually seen as barriers to civilization. They limit agriculture, isolate communities, and make large settlements difficult to sustain. For most of history, societies avoided them whenever possible, building their cities near rivers, forests, or fertile plains. Yet in the ancient Near East, one civilization did something unexpected. Instead of fleeing the desert, they learned how to reshape it. The Nabataeans built a society in one of the most unforgiving environments of the ancient world and managed to turn parts of that desert into productive farmland. This achievement was not the result of a single invention or sudden discovery. It was the outcome of careful observation, adaptation, and engineering that developed over generations. The Nabataeans lived in a region where rainfall was scarce and unpredictable. Most years brought only brief storms that disappeared almost as quickly as they arrived. For other societies, such conditions made agriculture nearly impossible. But the Nabataeans recognized something others ignored. Even the driest landscapes contain water. The challenge is not always the absence of water, but the ability to capture it before it vanishes. Instead of relying on permanent rivers, they learned to harvest water directly from seasonal rains and flash floods. This required understanding the landscape in extraordinary detail. Every slope, valley, and rock surface could guide water in a particular direction. By shaping channels, reservoirs, and terraces, they redirected these short bursts of water into storage systems that allowed it to be used long after the storms had passed. Over time, this created a network of water management infrastructure across the desert. Some of these systems were visible in the form of dams and cisterns carved into rock. Others were subtle modifications to natural terrain that slowed the flow of water and allowed it to seep into agricultural areas. The result was a landscape that functioned differently from its natural state. Rain that would normally vanish into the sand could now support crops. Soil that would otherwise dry out quickly retained moisture longer. Fields appeared where outsiders expected only stone and dust. These techniques required coordination and maintenance. Channels had to be cleared, reservoirs needed protection from erosion. Agricultural plots had to be carefully placed to take advantage of the stored water. The system worked because it was integrated into daily life. Farmers understood how the infrastructure functioned and adapted their practices to match the rhythms of rainfall and storage. This knowledge was practical rather than theoretical. It was passed through experience, not manuals. Outsiders who passed through Nabataean territory often focused on the visible monuments, particularly the famous rock-carved city of Petra. Yet the real foundation of Nabataean success was not the architecture that travelers admired, but the environmental engineering that allowed the society to exist in the first place. Without their water systems, Petra would have remained an isolated desert valley rather than a thriving center of trade and settlement. The Nabataeans did not simply survive the desert. They reorganized how the desert functioned. What makes Nabataean engineering particularly remarkable is that it was not designed only for survival, but for stability and growth. Their water systems allowed settlements to expand beyond what the natural environment would normally permit. Fields could be cultivated in areas that had once been considered uninhabitable. Orchards appeared in dry valleys. Vineyards and grain fields were sustained by carefully stored rainwater. This transformed the economic possibilities of the region. Agriculture provided food security, which in turn supported trade. The Nabataeans occupied a strategic position between Arabia, the Mediterranean, and the Near East. Caravans carrying incense, spices, textiles, and precious goods passed through their territory. Control over water meant control over the routes that crossed the desert. Travelers depended on Nabataean knowledge of the landscape. Wells and reservoirs were not only agricultural tools but also points of logistical power. This combination of environmental engineering and trade created a system that allowed the Nabataeans to prosper without building a traditional empire. They did not need vast armies or large territorial conquests to maintain influence. Their strength lay in mastery of the environment and the strategic management of resources that others could not easily access. The city of Petra became the most visible symbol of this system. Its monumental facades carved into sandstone cliffs often attract the most attention today. But the architecture was only one part of a much larger network. Surrounding Petra were terraces, dams, canals, and storage basins that captured every possible drop of rain. Even small seasonal floods were redirected and slowed, allowing water to be stored rather than lost. Modern researchers studying these systems have discovered that many of them were surprisingly advanced. Channels were designed to reduce erosion. Reservoirs were placed where natural rock formations protected them from evaporation. Some installations even included filtration techniques that allowed sediment to settle before water entered storage areas. These were not random constructions. They reflected deep familiarity with the desert's behavior. For centuries, this knowledge allowed Nabataean society to flourish in a region that outsiders considered hostile and empty. Yet the success of such a system depended on continuous maintenance and social cooperation. When political control of the region shifted and trade routes began to change under Roman rule, the balance that sustained the Nabataean system slowly weakened. Without the same level of coordination and reliance on the old caravan networks, parts of the water infrastructure fell into disuse. Fields that had once been productive gradually returned to arid conditions. The desert itself had not changed. What changed was the human system that had briefly reorganized it. Today, the remains of Nabataean water engineering still appear across the landscape around Petra. Dams, channels, and terraces reveal how carefully the environment had once been managed. They remind us that the desert was never as empty or passive as it seemed, was a landscape waiting for understanding. The Nabataeans demonstrated that even the harshest environments can support complex societies. When people learn to work with natural patterns rather than against them, their achievement challenges a common assumption about ancient civilizations. We often imagine progress as the domination of nature, but the Nabataeans succeeded through observation, patience, and adaptation. They did not conquer the desert. They studied it until they understood how to live within its limits. Which ancient civilizations do you think mastered environments that seemed impossible to control? Write your thoughts in the comments. Stay with humanity, facts, and mysteries, because sometimes the most impressive achievements in history are not the ones that built empires, but the ones that made life possible where it seemed impossible.